Hi, and thanks for watching this message video. Today we're continuing on in a series called Standouts, where I'm talking about different people throughout the Bible who stood out because of their relationship with God or with Christ, or in other words, the things that they said or the things that they did differentiated them from everybody else around them, and those things were exemplary or good or worth emulating. And the person that I'm talking about today is Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel, and the reason why was he was not afraid to fight for the right things. Now, if you're not familiar with the story of Jacob, he's the grandson of Abraham, who was considered the father of all Israel. And he just happens to be the one that the fulfillment of the promise to Abraham was made through. But according to the customs or traditions at that time, Jacob was not supposed to be the one that this promise was fulfilled through. It was actually supposed to be the firstborn son or his older twin brother Esau, who this was supposed to be fulfilled through. However, get this, God saw that Esau did not want to be a standout for him. And so he made plans around him. Let's just ponder that truth for a second. When God looks at your heart, does he have to make plans around you because he sees that you do not want to be a standout for him? If you didn't know this truth, God looks at every single person's heart, and therefore he knows exactly what is motivating them. For instance, take a look at this. Jeremiah 17:9-10. The human heart is the most deceitful of all things and desperately wicked. Who really knows how bad it is? But I, the Lord, search all hearts and examine secret motives. I give all people their due rewards according to what their actions deserve. If you've been watching this message series from the beginning on Standouts, then you know that I've already covered a fellow by the name of Thomas the twin. And in that message, I talked about how twins oftentimes have a scientifically measurable better life because they have a close relationship with their sibling. However, not all siblings that are twins experience that type of relationship growing up. And for those who know the story of Jacob and Esau, they definitely had some struggles in their relationship, and these struggles actually started in the womb. In fact, their mother Rebecca, sensing what was going on inside of the womb while she was pregnant, went to God and prayed about this, and he told her, literally, that her two sons were going to have some non-traditional destinies. Genesis 25:19-26. This is the account of the family of Isaac, the son of Abraham. When Isaac was 40 years old, he married Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel, the Aramean, from Padan Aram, and the sister of Laban, the Aramean. Isaac pleaded with the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was unable to have children. The Lord answered Isaac's prayer, and Rebekah became pregnant with twins. But the two children struggled with each other in her womb. So she went to ask the Lord about it. "Why is this happening to me?" she asked. And the Lord told her, "The sons in your womb will become two nations. From the very beginning, the two nations will be rivals. One nation will be stronger than the other, and your older son will serve your younger son." And when the time came to give birth, Rebekah discovered that she did indeed have twins. The first one was very red at birth and covered with thick hair like a fur coat. So they named him Esau. Then the other twin was born, with his hand grasping Esau's heel. So they named him Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when the twins were born. Again, in that culture, the firstborn son was everything, meaning if you were a second-born son and a twin, it had to feel like you had just missed the lottery, so to speak. However, in this situation, we know that Rebekah had been warned by God that these two sons, the older and the younger, were going to form a rivalry right from the very beginning, but that it would be the younger son that would ultimately end up being the leader. So we see their names were given differently. And if you hadn't picked this up already, the way that people named their children in that culture was very similar to what we have learned from a Native American culture, in that they named their children at the time of birth, and it was oftentimes based upon what they were seeing or experiencing. So with the situation with Esau, firstborn out, they named him Esau, which sounds like the Hebrew word for hair, because he had so much hair. But with Jacob, they named him Jacob, but this sounds like the Hebrew word deceiver. So there's a little bit of a hint built into Jacob's name, which makes more sense as the story unfolds, if you know the story. But before we move on with that, there are 3 questions that I need everybody to be thinking about. The first, where did Rebekah go to talk to God? Where did she physically go? Think about it. This was pre-tabernacle, pre-temple. So there was no real known place where she could go to meet with God, but yet she did, and she heard from God, and this may have happened more than once. And also keep in mind that in this particular culture, Rebekah received 0 inheritance. All of it passed along to the firstborn son. So it would have been of great interest for her to know which son that was. Which leads me to the next question we need to be thinking about. Number 2, was Esau's attitude known to others? Meaning, if God saw rebellion or troubles inside of Esau's heart, then maybe other people did too. I mean, obviously, the way that we think or the way that we are mulling over things inside of our head ultimately ends up showing up in our actions. So, were other people leery of him as well? Have you ever seen anybody and because of their character or their actions become a little bit leery of them? Or how about this? Put yourself in Jacob's shoes for a second. Growing up with a sibling like Esau, do you think he picked up on attitudes? How about you? As a sibling, if you have them, have you learned things from the decisions or the attitudes of your sibling? Have you figured out how to deal with them or people like them, even if you might be a little bit leery of them? That leads me to the third question. Did Rebekah tell Jacob what God said? Think about that. If Rebekah's future is tied to the son of blessing, then obviously she would want Jacob, who was going to receive that blessing from God, to know about that, perhaps. Or did she keep quiet? Or did she allow him to know what God said so that he could be somehow, some way formulating a plan, or at least looking for the opportunity to be able to seize the rights of the firstborn whenever that opportunity came up? If not, then how do you explain what happens next? Genesis 25, 27 through 34. As the boys grew up, Esau became a skillful hunter. He was an outdoorsman, but Jacob had a quiet temperament, preferring to stay at home. Isaac loved Esau because he enjoyed eating the wild game Esau brought home. But Rebekah loved Jacob. One day when Jacob was cooking some stew, Esau arrived home from the wilderness, exhausted and hungry. Esau said to Jacob, "I'm starved. Give me some of that red stew." This is how Esau got his other name, Edom, which means red. "All right," Jacob replied, "but trade me your rights as the firstborn son." "Look, I'm dying of starvation," said Esau. "What good is my birthright to me now?" But Jacob said, "First, you must swear that your birthright is mine." So Esau swore an oath, thereby selling all his rights as the firstborn to his brother Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau some bread and lentil stew. Esau ate the meal, then got up and left. He showed contempt for his rights as the firstborn. There was disdain in Esau's heart for this role of the firstborn son, the one who would become the patriarch. And as a result, God saw it. And chances are Rebekah saw it, Jacob saw it, and Isaac saw it, maybe even his grandfather Abraham saw it. As a result, God said, "No, you will not be the one that I fulfill this promise through to Abraham. Instead, it will go to Jacob, who is willing to fight for this right, knowing what this role involves." And he wasn't the only one, obviously, who was willing to fight for this. Rebekah was willing to fight for this as well. In fact, look at what happened later on. Genesis 27, 1 through 29. One day when Isaac was old and turning blind, he called for Esau, his older son, and said, "My son." "Yes, father," Esau replied. "I am now an old man," Isaac said, "and I don't know when I may die. Take your bow and quiver full of arrows and go out into the open country to hunt some wild game for me. Prepare my favorite dish and bring it here for me to eat. Then I will pronounce the blessing that belongs to you, my firstborn son, before I die." But Rebekah overheard what Isaac had said to his son Esau. So when Esau left to hunt for the wild game, she said to her son Jacob, "Listen, I overheard your father say to Esau, 'Bring me some wild game and prepare me a delicious meal. Then I will bless you in the Lord's presence before I die.' Now, my son, listen to me. Do exactly as I tell you. Go out into the flocks and bring me 2 fine young goats. I will use them to prepare your father's favorite dish. Then take the food to your father so he can eat it and bless you before he dies." "But look," Jacob replied to Rebekah, "my brother Esau is a hairy man and my skin is smooth. What if my father touches me? He'll see that I'm trying to trick him, and then he'll curse me instead of blessing me." But his mother replied, "Then let the curse fall on me, my son. Just do what I tell you. Go out and get the goats for me." So Jacob went out and got the young goats for his mother. Rebekah took them and prepared a delicious meal, just the way Isaac liked it. Then she took Esau's favorite clothes, which were there in the house, and gave them to her younger son, Jacob. She covered his arms and the smooth part of his neck with the skin of the young goats. Then she gave Jacob the delicious meal, including freshly baked bread. So Jacob took the food to his father. "My father," he said. "Yes, my son," Isaac answered. "Who are you, Esau or Jacob?" Jacob replied, "It's Esau, your firstborn son. I've done as you told me. Here is the wild game. Now sit up and eat it so you can give me your blessing." Isaac asked, "How did you find it so quickly, my son?" "The Lord your God put it in my path," Jacob replied. Then Isaac said to Jacob, "Come closer so I can touch you and make sure that you really are Esau." So Jacob went closer to his father, and Isaac touched him. "The voice is Jacob's, but the hands are Esau's," Isaac said. But he did not recognize Jacob because Jacob's hands felt hairy just like Esau's. So Isaac prepared to bless Jacob. "But are you really my son Esau?" he asked. "Yes, I am," Jacob replied. Then Isaac said, "Now, my son, bring me the wild game. Let me eat it, and then I will give you my blessing." So Jacob took the food to his father, and Isaac ate it. He also drank the wine that Jacob served him. Then Isaac said to Jacob, "Please come a little closer and kiss me, my son." So Jacob went over and kissed him, and when Isaac caught the smell of his clothes, he was finally convinced, and he blessed his son. He said, "Ah, the smell of my son is like the smell of the outdoors, which the Lord has blessed. From the dew of heaven and the richness of the earth, may God always give you abundant harvest of grain and bountiful new wine. May many nations become your servants, and may they bow down to you. May you be the master over your brothers, and may your mother's sons bow down to you. All who curse you will be cursed, and all who bless you will be blessed." That is an insane amount of deception that was going on both Rebekah and Jacob's part. And for that reason, a lot of people draw a great big question mark in their mind and think, how could God bless anybody who is that blatantly deceptive and that big of a liar? Well, here's the reason why, is because God looks at things differently than us. He sees motives. He understood why they were doing that. He saw their deception just like he saw the deception on Moses' parents' part or on Rahab's part, the prostitute, if you know their stories, as fighting for the right thing. And when God sees that you and I are fighting for the right thing, that changes things. Esau didn't want to fight for the right thing. If you guys have been paying attention in this Standout series, especially over the last couple of weeks, you know that when it comes to being the patriarch or the firstborn son who becomes the patriarch, that comes with a massive responsibility, and Esau traded that for a bowl of soup. He was not interested in this role, the system of doing things or the way of doing things that God had instituted. You see, long before Jacob's descendants, the Levitical priests, were performing sacrifices on behalf of all of the Israelites in order to make them holy or blameless or spotless in the sight of God or to be cleansed of sins, that was the role of the patriarch. That was their role. Abel did this. Noah did this. Job did this. Abraham did this. Isaac did this. And Jacob ended up doing these same things. As a result, he was the one who became the fulfillment of the promise. Esau did not want this role. He had contempt for this role, and as a result, God warned his mother Rebekah long before he was even born that the one who would be fulfilling the promise would not be him. In fact, look at what happens next. Genesis 27:30 through 36. As soon as Isaac had finished blessing Jacob, and almost before Jacob had left his father, Esau returned from his hunt. Esau prepared a delicious meal and brought it to his father. Then he said, "Sit up, my father, and eat my wild game so you can give me your blessing." But Isaac asked him, "Who are you?" Esau replied, "It's your son, your firstborn son Esau." Isaac began to tremble uncontrollably and said, "And who shall serve me wild game? I have already eaten it, and I blessed him just before you came, and yes, that blessing must stand." When Esau heard his father's words, he let out a loud and bitter cry. "Oh, my father, what about me? Bless me too," he begged. But Isaac said, "Your brother was here, and he tricked me. He's taken away your blessing." Esau exclaimed, "No wonder his name is Jacob, for now he has cheated me twice. First he took my rights as the firstborn, and now he has stolen my blessing. Oh, haven't you saved even one blessing for me?" Jacob the deceiver. What a name to be known for. The guy who cheats his brother twice out of a blessing and yet gets blessed by God for it. But this story is not about God blessing deception. In fact, if you know the rest of the story, right after Isaac gives Jacob this blessing, Rebekah sends him away to her brother to go and find a wife, but mostly because she knows that Esau is about ready to kill Jacob. And for the next 20 years, Jacob ends up suffering all kinds of deception at the hands of his uncle Laban. For instance, he tricks him into marrying both Leah and Rachel, his daughters, for 14 years of service. And then, over the course of the following 6 years, he changed his wages multiple times in an attempt to be able to strip as much wealth away from Jacob as he possibly could. But during this whole entire time, God punished Laban for his deception while rewarding Jacob. In fact, over the course of this 20 years, God not only softened Esau's heart, but then when Jacob and Esau ended up reuniting, their families ended up celebrating together in harmony. So, this story is not about God rewarding deception. This story is about God rewarding people who choose to do the right thing, even if it comes with risk, and even if it means a little bit of deception. So let me ask you this question. Would you be willing to be deceptive for God? Certainly you've heard of missionaries or people, like teachers or politicians even, sometimes here in this country or maybe even in other countries, who, through deception, put themselves at risk to spread the good news about Jesus Christ, even if it might cost them their lives. Well, this is what made Jacob a standout. This was why God blessed him, not because he was deceptive, but because he was willing to fight for the right thing, even through deception. And God could see that his motives were all about that. And so, that's what makes Jacob a man worth imitating.